You might have heard the news that the incredible gaming duo Nobuo Uematsu and Hironobu Sakaguchi, creators of Final Fantasy as we know it, created a whole new Final Fantasy game. It's called Fantasian and it's a freaking bomb. I had the incredible chance to sit down with them, the guys who invented Final Fantasy, to chat about their experiences working in video games, video game music, and about Fantasian and Final Fantasy itself. A special thanks to Mike at Mistwalker for translating this interview live. He was there with us in the call, and it wouldn't have been possible without him. I would like to say thank you so much for being here, for your time. This is a special moment. Sakaguchi-san to Uematsu-san wa boku no hero desu. So, 本当にありがとうございます。I have been playing Fantasian, and that screen behind me there, the big Okino Terebi, I bought an Apple TV to play the game, and I'm so glad that I did, because it's really amazing. So while playing it, I seriously felt like I was transported back to my childhood playing, the old Final Fantasy games that I grew up playing. And I hope that every single Final Fantasy player is going to enjoy it. But I want to ask a few questions, and I would like to talk about the game, and I would also like to ask you a few questions about yourselves. I've seen that you've done interviews with many YouTubers, and I would like to ask you things that maybe they didn't ask. So, Sakaguchi-san to Uematsu-san, what is your favorite thing about Fantasian? Especially when you compare it with the previous games that you worked on in the past, like the Final Fantasy series.
まあそれはまあ音楽ですね。
Wow.
100% for me, that's going to be the music. for Fantasian, of course, the music. And when we first had an early build of the game, there was demo music placed as placeholder inside the build. And of course, the melodies and everything was really, really amazing with that. But when we heard the final orchestrations with the recordings from the studio, everyone, including myself on the team, said how that elevated the entire experience of Fantasian. So I think it made a huge difference to have the music.
What about Uematsu-san's opinion on Fantasian also?
For me, it was Sakaguchi-san's sheer passion towards this project. And I think that was a bit contagious. And I really wanted to make sure I was answering his passion towards this project with what I could do and bring to the table, which is the music. And really, for myself, having this level of freedom, creative freedom to be able to explore and take on new challenges for myself as well was a really great aspect of this project.
Fantasian no orchestra BGM は本当にすごいです。I was playing, there's a level on an airship close to the beginning of the game. There's a boss fight, and before the boss fight, there's this beautiful orchestration that plays, and then the boss kicks in, and it's just, as a composer, I was really blown away by what I was hearing, and I noticed that Uematsu-san was able to just, go to town and do really a very beautiful orchestration with that. So yeah, I felt that. I think when Uematsu-san and Sakaguchi-san work together on a game, there's a special feeling that comes out of it. I don't know what it is, but I felt it when playing it. And I wonder, since they have this beautiful relationship, what Uematsu-san thinks is the best thing about working with Sakaguchi-san, and what Sakaguchi-san thinks is the best thing about working with Uematsu-san.
For myself, Uematsu-san, my first game that I've composed for was one of Sakaguchi-san's games. And really, I think that's where I've established my foundation or basics of video game composition. And since then, it's been 30 some odd years. I've composed music for many, many games, of course. And in a weird way, I think you begin to forget that very pure feeling you have towards game music composition. And I don't want to say it almost gets mass produced, but there's kind of a certain flow when you're composing 4 games. Okay, I need this type of build here, and then you need to, this is what happens in game music, right? And you get too used to this and almost put this on a rail. Not to say that I'm not putting my heart into it, but I think there's a certain kind of process that game music goes through, and it loses that freshness. But I think that's what was very different about Fantasian and working with Sakaguchi-san, between all the conversations and communication we had, perhaps even over emails. It really helped me return to that very pure state, and it made me think again, okay, how do I make video game music very fun, and how do I make it engaging? So it helped me in many ways return to my roots of video game music composition.
Yeah, I can feel that. Especially, I was just playing 1 hour ago in preparation of this interview, and there's a boss fight against a Mecteria beast, like a slime or something. And the music is so amazing. It's like a very beautiful bass line. It has like a, I think, accordion or something. It's immense and it's very nice. Like it's very unique, but it has a lot of groove and it's very nice. So great job on that. And what about Sakaguchi-san? What does he think is the best thing about working with?
直接のきっかけ
A little indirectly, but originally the inspiration or kind of origins of my making Fantasian came from when I was playing Final Fantasy VI with a few of my old colleagues on a certain broadcast. But even before this live stream where we were playing Final Fantasy VI together, I recall a conversation I had with Uematsu-san, and I don't know if I would say he influenced me in any way, but I think you could kind of trace the origins even farther. Uematsu-san planted a seed even long before this certain Final Fantasy VI broadcast. And I want to say this is about 7 to 8 years ago. After we had made Final Fantasy 1 through 6, we had conversations about, I think we've really mastered that pixel art format of creating an RPG experience and really achieved kind of peak performance or what that medium could do. And during this, there was a crowd of us gathered together, and Uematsu-san had mentioned, well, for Final Fantasy VII, we took the game in a completely different direction, but what if we kept on making Final Fantasies and kept going down this pixel art methodology, whether it's on the Super Famicom or not? Like, what would have happened? And there was about, I want to say, 15 of us former Final Fantasy development team members, and Uematsu-san said something to the effect of, hey, wouldn't it be great if all of us could gather together again and create a Final Fantasy-like experience? And at the time, of course, I dismissed it, thinking that's crazy talk, Uematsu-san. What are you talking about? But in many ways, there was what Uematsu-san had said 7 to 8 years ago, and the Final Fantasy VI live stream broadcast where we were doing a Let's Play on a program. And ultimately that all led to Fantasian. So perhaps Uematsu-san's words from that day somehow stuck with me, and I carried it, and ultimately it came to fruition in the form of this game.
I am so glad that Uematsu-san said those words, because I feel that with Final Fantasy, I'm a huge fan. Like, Final Fantasy is my #1 favorite game, and I was talking to Uematsu-san before and telling him about how I became a composer because of Final Fantasy, and that changed my life. So I love it. I love the new ones as well as the old ones, but I know in the community there's a large amount of people who stopped liking it a lot after 10. 10 was the last one they really liked. And I feel that those people should definitely play Fantasian, because it does feel like, the continuation of a type of Final Fantasy game that is not being made anymore. So I hope that they see this interview and they pick up Fantasian, because it's great. But to those people, like, what would you say? Like, what do you think is the biggest reason for JRPG fans, especially fans of the old Final Fantasies, to play Fantasian, besides the fact that it was made by the legends who made Final Fantasy 1 to 6?
さっきの話だと
For us, it kind of leads into the last question, but this, I guess you could call it almost like a Final Fantasy 6.5 or a Final Fantasy 10.5, where we saw these different branches of Final Fantasy that has not been developed any further, but revived it in a way. And for us to say it, I think that would be kind of weird. So this is something that, Alex, we entrust to you to help spread the word and build excitement.
アレックさんが広めてください。頑張ってください。
I will do it. I will do that. It does deserve that.
Yeah, Uematsu-san, 何か. As you mentioned, Alex, a lot of fans, I think, say Final Fantasy changed, or it's not Final Fantasy anymore, kind of as 10 with being the pivotal point. But whether you take video games or anime or manga, I think you always have to challenge yourself into producing something new and taking on new challenges with these mediums. So as you transition from one generation to the next, I still believe that what they've done and what they've created is Final Fantasy, and watching it evolve in the way it does makes guys like us, old geezers like us, quite happy. So it's, I think, it's not something that when I create this music, I really feel like I'm in the moment, and I don't just want the old fans who play games because of the nostalgia factor, just because I liked the way JRPGs used to be. This is, of course, us creating certain emotions and certain feelings in the moment as I'm creating, because that's all I'm looking at. I'm not looking at the next project when I'm composing music. So this is something that I hope people play out of not just nostalgia, but anyone can play this and anyone can experience and go on this journey together. And we try to make things that I feel are very fun, that I think will move people. And I think it will transcend just the so-called old Final Fantasy demographic. And I hope it reaches them as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, that's honestly, to my shame, that's what when I saw Fantasian, I'm like, oh wow, this is old school. I'm gonna feel that nostalgia. But then when I played it, I realized, hey, this is not actually just like an old school JRPG. This is just transcending that genre. It's doing so much more. And there's like, if I could sell Fantasian in one phrase, I would say they fixed random encounters. Because now there's a dimension and you don't have to do all the random encounters. And it's so nice, you know. But in general, like the diorama and like everything, the characters are so beautiful. And like also the fact that there's now poems that accompany the gameplay. You have these texts like poems and stuff. And yeah, there's loads of new things and the music is very different. So I hope people don't categorize it as old school, because it's not that. It's like it's whole new brand of game. And I'm very happy to know that, you know, Sakaguchi-san and Uematsu-san do this. They're like, they keep on being visionaries, despite people want them to be like, hey, do what you did before again. I know how hard it must be as an artist, because I am one myself, but I really admire that the willingness to go forwards and to look beyond what people see. And sometimes people catch up after 20 years. And I think that's what happened with FS7 Remake, maybe. The music Uematsu-san made many years ago, when you hear the remake, you're like, wow, this was written 20 years ago, but it sounds like it was made to be like written on big, like orchestral arrangements, like modern standards in 2021. And yeah, I don't know how they do it, but it seems like whatever they create, they look in the future. That's very amazing. So I'm really proud of both of them.
Yes.
Okay. Uematsu-san, what was it that pushed you to become a game composer? I heard that you're a fan of PFM, Premiata Forneria Marconi. 私はイタリア人です. As an Italian, it makes me so proud to know that my favorite composer in the world is inspired by a band from my country. So I'd like to know what other bands and other musicians and artists inspired your work and made you want to become a composer.
So I, of course, a long time ago, listened to the radio a lot, and I've listened to most of the popular music, especially rock, including Elton John, the Carpenters, Stevie Wonder, Led Zeppelin. あと、もう一人いましたよね、今。
Deep Purple.
Deep Purple.
And Deep Purple, yes. And I think listening to these artists alone probably wouldn't have put me on the path of becoming a music composer. But in the progressive rock movement, it wasn't simply just rock where they were rocking for the sake of rocking. They started introducing some orchestrations in the midst of a lot of heavy rock. And these include a lot of other type of artists. すみません、その違うジャンルのアーティスト、プログレッシブロックの二方の名前がちょっとピックアップが。
例えばイエスとか、
Yes.
エマーソン・レイカー・パーマーとか、ジェネシスとかですかね。
And Genesis, Emerson, Palmer.
Hi.
And it taught me that the rock genre could be very beautiful, and it could carry its own melody that works well with an orchestration. And that got me on the path of looking into more of the classical music genre. And that ultimately led me to discovering artists like PMF. And it was just really, really beautiful rock that I think set the foundation and gave me a lot of ideas for what I could do and compose in a role-playing game.
I suppose that's how One Winged Angel came to be. Like, it's this like blend of many different genres, and everybody, when they heard it, was like, wow, they lost their minds. And still, after so many years, people still lose their minds. And yeah, it's beautiful. And it's I can feel in Uematsu-san's music that he has like a very wide variety of inspirations, because you may have like, you know, a techno piece with the man with the machine gun, and then you have an orchestral piece, and you have a flamenco, and you know, you kind of have everything, and there's nothing that he can't do. So yeah, that's probably why he's my favorite.
ワンウィングドエンジェルはね、
I think One Winged Angel I would attribute not so much to the idea of progressive rock, but that was more of an experiment for myself when we were working on Final Fantasy VII, and I decided I was going to compose the music for the last boss. Every morning I would wake up and come up with a few different phrases, a few measures, and I would do this for a few weeks, and after about 3 weeks, I would have a lot of different ideas that I had laid out on the tracks, and it was about mixing and matching these different pieces to see what order really resonated the most. So I think that's more of a kind of modern music approach, or is more like a different genre, not related to progressive rock.
現代音楽の発想に近いかも。実験音楽ということで。
Okay. I would like to know, Sakaguchi-san. I'm trying to do questions to both because I'd like to talk.
Of course.
I don't want to keep anyone bored.
Okay, yeah.
Sakaguchi-san, with your fantasy games, especially Fantasian, I find there's so many interesting parallels to real life. For example, in the beginning of Fantasian, we see that the world is in danger because of the threat of Mecteria, which is like this technology that wants to invade and destroy humans. And yeah, that sounds like a Black Mirror episode. And I wonder if there's some life lessons that you're trying to teach the world through Fantasian. And if so, what is the message you'd love to see people get out of playing the game?
結構いつもやっぱり出だし
With the Fantasian in the beginning, oftentimes when I create fantasy worlds in the very beginning, I think about how can I surprise and how can I shock the audience. Incidentally, with Fantasian, I decided not to do that, and I took it in a completely different direction. So I'm using narrative tools that I'm sure people have seen a lot in the past. Main character has amnesia, and world is kind of being enshrouded or taken over by, in this case, the Mecteria. And I think people have seen these types of narratives before, but this is really setting the stage for something a lot more complex that I'm trying to depict, which we'll see more of in part 2, which leads to the balance of order and chaos, and it ties into other themes that I have more personally, of this idea of the study of physics and how our universe is it shrinking, is it expanding, what's happening in this universe. So in part 2, there's going to be some things that might make the audience go, wait, what's happening in this world? Like, what are they saying? And I think I am able to do that because I decided to really draw people in with a very almost old school style beginning, whether it's the game mechanics or the type of world and narrative that we've set up. But in part 2, there are going to be a lot of traps, so don't worry.
I was wondering if the game is going to come to other consoles as well, other than Apple, because I know there's also people who don't have an Apple device and don't have access to one, but they would love the game.
自分がゲーム
As far as other consoles, I don't have any plans at the moment. And this was designed really from the ground up as an Apple Arcade game. Incidentally, Apple was the reason I decided to go into the game industry with a very, very early computer they had called the Apple II. And to see that I'm able to work with Apple again towards the end of my game development career this way, I think it's really, really interesting. And Alex, you mentioned that you have an Apple TV, which I believe was maybe 179 USD.
Yeah,
So it's
so much.
not, I think the barrier to entry is not as high as people think. So I encourage everyone there's no need to wait. If you want to play Fantasian, there are means to play right
I
now
agree.
for
It's
pretty
definitely
reasonable
worth it.
price.
Yeah, it's very worth it. And I hope they're going to make more games on Apple TV because it's a very nice system. I was wondering, Uematsu-san, what is your favorite track you've wrote for a game and your favorite character from a game you've wrote music for? And also Sakaguchi-san, what's your favorite character from a game you worked on and your favorite track from a game you worked on?
と、一番好きなキャラクター、この2つをお聞きしたいです。
難しいな。Sorry. I'm very curious.
どんな曲
I can't remember what kind of music there was.
でもね、やっぱり
So in terms of music, I always say I'm in love with the latest video game soundtrack that I compose, and I always think that it's good to have that. So I'm going to say Fantasian, and there's one in particular right now that I'm practicing, and it's this piano piece that Leo plays. I don't know if
So
you're in the
airship.
Cruise Slider. Yeah. And the Japanese title is called Omoi. I'm going to have to double check the English localization before I commit to anything.
なんかセンチメントになってる。
Sentiment is the
Sentiment,
English
yeah.
title. Yes, to Leo's piano piece, and I think I'm practicing that right now, so I'm gonna say that. And as far as characters are concerned, I'm gonna go with Kefka from Final Fantasy VI, and I think that character really kind of stands out in its own right. So I think Kefka.
僕は
Normally, in these instances, I would say the theme to Final Fantasy I, and whenever I listen to this in a concert, it for some reason always makes me tear up, regardless of the situation. But today, I'm actually going to go with Sentiment also. And Uematsu and I have been talking about this. I actually just bought a keyboard so I could practice that myself.
あ、出た
はい、譜面を上松に譜面をこの前に送ってくれって言って、はい。今から
And Uematsu-san said, Sakaguchi-san, next time I'm playing a concert on stage, you should come on stage and play that piece for me. Sakaguchi-san said, well, how about we do a duet on that? We'll both play side by side on the piano. So Uematsu-san, you have to make a new arrangement now for four hands.
That'll be great. That would be amazing. Speaking of music that makes you cry, I will also reply to the question. I am someone who never cries for some reason. I don't know. I'm broken. I don't know what I have. But one song that is always going to make me cry is the Final Fantasy VII main theme. I saw it at Distant Worlds some years ago, and they were showing it with some footage of Cloud walking in the world map. And while the orchestra was playing the theme, and I started crying like a baby, like I haven't done for like 10 years or something. And I just love it so much because Final Fantasy, especially Final Fantasy VII, taught me a lot. I played that game when I was a child. I spent so many afternoons playing it, and it taught me to see the beauty in the world. And also characters like Zack Fair from Final Fantasy VII taught me to embrace my dreams. And growing up, I was always fascinated by these games, and I listened to the music a lot. And I don't know, it gave me a place to belong. And I thought, wow, like what Hironobu Sakaguchi-san and Nobuo Uematsu-san have done here, creating this world is so precious because it's, it's a place where so many people can belong. And I wanted to, when I grew up, do the same for other people too. So I became a composer because of Final Fantasy, because I was like, I want to do what Uematsu-san did for multiple thousands of people. I want to do it myself as well. And I made it. I'm a professional composer now. That changed my life. And it's one of the most beautiful gifts that I ever received. This passion, this desire to do good to other people is something I learned from you too. And I am so happy for that. I'm so grateful for that. And I was wondering if you would like to hear a Final Fantasy VII arrangement that I wrote. And it's very special because when I published it, a lot of people said that they cried. Just like I cry when I listened to the FSL main theme. It was a bit of a full circle moment, and if now you would, like to listen to it and tell me what you think about it, it would make me so happy. If there's no time, that's fine as well. But
たらぜひお二人にちょっとだけ流すので聞いていただいても、はい、よろしいですか？
はいはいはい。
This couldn't have been us, could it? But what if it was?
It was us. We did this.
But this isn't the way it's supposed to be. Sephiroth has to be stopped. There's no greater threat to the planet than him.
I can't help but wonder if this is a lost cause.
Some lost causes are worth fighting for.
I know that together we can do this.
The world won't end today. But you will.
I'm waiting.
This is the point of no return.
Embrace your dreams. Protect your honor. As a soldier! Almost there, Cloud. We're almost there.
なるほど。はい。
ありがとうございます。ありがとう。
トレーラーみたいだね。映画のトレーラーみたいです。
Yeah, it looked like a theatrical movie trailer.
Yeah, I was trying to go for that sound. I love Final Fantasy a lot, and I also made sort of like a crazy funky One-Winged Angel version and so many other types of Final Fantasy tracks because I just love this music so much. And I'm not the only one. You like Uematsu-san and Sakaguchi-san really created like a cult classic with Final Fantasy. Everybody just loves making art of it.
ツイッターのあれ見ましたよ、ベース。ね、すごいね、ペロンペロンペロンペロンペロンみたいな。
ありがとうございます。
Yeah, they saw your Fantasian funk arrangement with the bass.
I'm so happy. Uematsu-san and Sakaguchi-san, what do you think makes video games and video game music special? Like, you've been working in this field for such a long time, and I wonder, Sakaguchi-san could have usually written books or create stories in many other ways. And Uematsu-san has the talent to make any music he wants. So why did they choose video games? What makes it feel so special for them?
最後、坂口さんにまとめてもらうとして、じゃあ僕が先に言う。
I'm going to go first and leave the kind of final wrap up for Sakaguchi-san, so I'll put pressure on him. But for me, honestly, growing up, there was no such thing as video games. The entire industry and genre didn't exist. And growing up, I think around college was when the first Famicom was released. So I can't really go back to my childhood and say I was really influenced by games or I always dreamed of becoming a video game music composer because the entire genre didn't exist at the time. And looking back, I wanted to create a hit with music. I wanted to perhaps maybe compose something for movies, but neither one of those really panned out. And in an odd twist of fate, I was introduced to Square Enix, of course, through Sakaguchi-san, and was able to discover this completely new genre. So I don't want to sound too cliche, but I think it was fate in many ways that brought me to the video game industry and composing music for video games.
鳥山明の
For me, there's an editor at Jump named Torishima-san who really kind of took Toriyama Akira under his wing and helped groom him and turn him into the mangaka that he is today. And he was really a mentor figure towards me. And when we would talk, he would always say how the video game medium is just unfair because he edits so many and sees so many mangas. And in the mangas, he said, you all have a hard time establishing the protagonist and really getting the readers and audience to relate and fall in love with them. But if you take a game, the player easily superimposes himself on top of the protagonist of the game. And because of that, I think whether it's games or video game music, the players feel a different level of immersion. It's much easier to immerse yourself and find that empathy for the characters with whom you're playing. And I'm going to say this because this isn't an interview in Japan. I think, it's in English, so we could say this. But unlike the music for anime or, I guess, linear narrative, like any type of footage or video, the music for video games, because of those reasons, naturally has a deeper level of immersion. I think you can feel it. You see a lot of the fans feel it. They oftentimes are much more passionate about video game music than they are about a lot of other music that is accompanied to different linear content or linear media. And I really think, with that, Uematsu-san's melodies especially can cause people to feel something combined with the video game medium. So that to me is how I'm going to wrap this up. But I think that's what attributes to this deeper emotional connection.
Well, I'm so happy, and I'm sure millions of people all over the world are happy for this weird twist of fate of Uematsu-san ending up working on Square on games instead of films, and Sakaguchi-san being such a fan of music. That combination created one of the most beautiful series of stories, games, and most beautiful soundtracks ever created. And I'm sure that you know that, but I just want to remind you that there's millions of people who had their life changed because of you. Like millions of artists, probably thousands of artists who picked up the arts because of you. And as one of them, I just want to thank you because that really changed my life for the better. I don't know who I would be if it wasn't for the games you created. In a weird way, we say games and it sounds, diminutive. It sounds like, oh yeah, it's just a game. But actually it's stories with a soul and with a heart that we're never going to forget. So thank you very much for that. And thank you for your time and for Fantasian. I know it's your last game. Last soundtrack for Uematsu-san, last game for Sakaguchi-san. And what a beautiful game to end, your careers with. So I cannot wait for part 2. I hope people are going to play it. And I thank you for your time again.
ありがとうございます。Thank you. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Alex.
Bye
Thank
bye.
you.
I'm so grateful that I got the opportunity to talk to these two geniuses. And they are so incredibly nice and incredibly humble and kind for people of the same magnitude as they are. And I'm so glad they gifted us with this new game because it's really freaking good. I definitely recommend anybody who likes JRPG games to try Fantasian, especially if you like the old school JRPGs, even though Fantasian is not an old school JRPG. As I said in the interview, this game looks forward, but it's made by the people who are in charge of Final Fantasy 1 all the way to 10. So if you like that flair of fantasy game, this one is gonna feel like Christmas to you. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!